If you were to ask me what the best Spyro the Dragon game is, then I'd probably say Spyro 2. But if you ask me what my favorite Spyro game is, I'm picking Spyro 1 every time. In practice, you could argue that the original Spyro the Dragon on PlayStation 1 is the weakest of the original trilogy. The next two games added in great quality of life improvements, tighter controls, more variety, and bigger levels. However, throughout the years, there's just always been something about the first game's vibe that stuck with me, which I think back fondly on. I played through the game again to try and see if I could put this specific sort of vibe and feeling into words. Just for reference, I also played through the newer Spyro Reignited trilogy version of this game as well, and it does play better in a lot of regards. But there's a lot of the feel of the original PS1 version that doesn't quite reach the updated remake. So this video will be focused on the 1998 PS1 version, warts and all, but I'll dip into the newer version as well to see how it holds up and if the vibe translates. Especially since unless you're emulator pilled like me, you'll probably prefer to pay for this version and seek out the PS1 ISO to use on an emulator. Booting up this game is like freebasing pure uncut nostalgia. I'll get it out the way right now by saying the music in this game rocks so hard. The soundtrack to this game is composed by Stuart Copeland, who was the drummer in the pop rock band The Police. Copeland had done music for film and TV after The Police broke up in 1986, notably including Oliver Stone's Wall Street and Good Burger starring Keenan and Kel. The 90s were an exciting time for video games, because each year big steps forward were being taken in terms of what a game could look like and sound like. It's hardly comparable anymore, but you have to imagine that just a few years before Spyro the Dragon, video games sounded like this. But now they can provide CD quality soundtracks akin to films. This game's main theme song is triumphant sounding but with playful touches, which I think pairs well with the character of Spyro, since he's a little scamp who sounds like a 90s skater kid, like Edward Furlong in Terminator 2 type vibes.
What about Nasty Newark? I'm going after him.
His mannerisms are sometimes modeled after a cat, which is cool. You can see it in his idle animation here. This game's plot is essentially this old-ass dragon insults the villain, Nasty Nork, on live TV, and Nasty Nork just says fuck this and turns all of them into crystal. However, Spyro, being a little dude, avoids the spell and sets off to go rescue them all. Spyro the Dragon is a collection of levels in which you set the trapped dragons free, collect colourful gems, and sometimes retrieve dragon eggs from thieves. Spyro's moveset includes Flame, Charge, and Glide. He can also roll too, which is never really needed. There's a series of themed worlds to play through, and this first one is the Artisans, which is like a kind of general grasslands type theme. I don't really know what you'd class this as, it's like magical countryside maybe. A smart touch you may notice about this hub world is none of the enemies attack you, letting you get used to the controls with no threat. Into the first proper level, and by the way, one of the coolest loading screens ever is this one right here. Mainly because it's involved enough to not really feel like it's loading. It captures your attention with the gems going into the treasure chest and the bright skybox in the background setting the mood. A big L for the reignited version is that this loading screen doesn't have all the gems spray over the screen, and also the loading is longer in that version, and it chugs a bit. Like honestly, we've got to the point where it's acceptable that you can just remake a game from 1998 and have it run worse. Kind of embarrassing honestly. I'm playing on a decent PC too, so who knows what it's like on a base PS4 for example. But at least you can do this, so it looks like Spyro is trying to reach the gem. Like, gimme that. Also, sometimes in Reignited, Spyro will do these crazy huge swoops down into the level, which is fun. He's a little showman now. This first proper level, Stonehill, is a pretty easygoing introduction. You're in the Windows XP countryside now. I feel like everyone who plays would get up here and then think, whoa, look how much more of the level there is, only to get cock-blocked like this. Your objective in Spyro is to collect. It's a classic collectathon. The main objective are these crystal dragons, which you touch to free and view a questionably voice-acted cutscene.
Good job, Spyro. One day you'll be able to tell all the dragons about your amazing adventures.
There's a lot of gems scattered around which are quite fun to collect. Smartly, you're accompanied by Sparks the dragonfly, who will pick up gems near you, acting like a magnet. Meaning Spyro doesn't have to be touching the gem, just near it to pick it up. This saves a lot of frustration and near misses. Sparks is another smart game design decision, as he represents Spyro's health in-game rather than via a HUD element, where each hit he turns from gold to blue to green and then disappears, also removing your gem magnet ability. There's harmless little creatures called fodder, which you can flame to release a butterfly which will restore 1 health and make Sparks reappear or change colour. I do feel a bit bad when I'm plowing through these innocent little dudes, but I gotta get the butterflies to feed my pet dragonfly. I'm sorry bros. Stonehill is a pretty chill, sunny little first level. I especially like the secret beach with a cave, that's a cool vibe. You also gotta chase these blue dudes around too to get dragon eggs. I used to find this a bit of a chore, but I guess over time I've just gotten kinda goated because it's a no sweat for me now. Though ironically, in the Reignited version I found a few of these thieves tougher than the original because Spyro's momentum feels different. This second level, Dark Hollow, has my favourite piece of music in the whole game. It's already time to glaze Stuart Copeland some more because he just gets it, dude. His process for writing the music for Spyro was to play through the level a few times, kind of immerse himself in the vibes, and then compose a complimentary song. Clearly he didn't think too much about how video games had sounded in the past and made something distinct that holds up amazing to this very day. On this playthrough, I decided I'd spare myself the headache of getting all the gems, since I've already done that once on PS1 for completionist's sake, and it was a bit of a grind. In my opinion, if you want a breezy game you can run through in 3 to 4 hours, then just getting all the dragons and eggs is a fun enough task. No need to agonize over gems. Dark Hollow's vibe is like a nighttime grotto lit by street lamps and a big bright full moon. I love these little campfires you can light, very cozy vibes. Again, a simple level, but one with good character. Town Square is bathed in this sunrise-themed skybox. Something kinda unmatched about Spyro is these skyboxes. They drench each level in so much atmosphere, and there was clearly so much thought put into creating and applying them to different levels. They will represent different times of day, there's different positions of the sun or moon, clouds, stars, planets, or mountains present. A seemingly small touch that ends up being a defining feature of the game, which elevates the feel and mood up so much. Really looking into them, they are quite beautiful in a way that you wouldn't expect for a PS1 title. And another place immediately where the strength of using a skybox to establish atmosphere is in this level, Toasty, which is named after the boss that you'll fight here. This has one of the more ominous music tracks in the game, which sets up higher stakes, but the fiery sunset which has bleached the surrounding water orange is kind of a big vibe. This is the first level where you might actually start taking hits from enemies, courtesy of these sheepdogs. Hilariously though, the actual boss is the easier part of the level, which will become an unfortunate pattern in this game. This dragon we free hypes Toasty up as one of Gnasty Gnorc's most devious henchmen, but he turns out just to be a sheep on stilts. I'm starting to think this Gnasty Gnorc dude is a bit of a fraud if this is one of his best men. One cool thing about the Artisan's world is that each level has a distinct mood, due to being set at a different time of day. Stone Hill feels like a sunny afternoon, Dark Hollow is at nighttime, then it's a different sort of sunrise and sunset vibe in Town Square and Toasty. They flex the variety early on, and thankfully some of the stuff they pull out later is even cooler. Lastly, in this first world is Sunny Flight, which is a flying level. Spyro can't properly fly in the regular levels, but there are these levels built for him to freely fly around. The aim is to collect a series of various objectives, so here it's treasure chests, barrels on trains, Gnorc planes, and some gates. The objective is to get all of these in one sequence for the maximum gem payout. I couldn't do these levels as a kid. I was terrible at any game with strict time limits, and this time limit can feel quite strict. People seem to dislike them today, which is strange. I think playing now, it's usually easy to be guided into the optimal path and get all the objectives in a sequence. These are a fun change of pace, honestly, and I like them. They're tricky but satisfying to pull off. Let's quickly check in on how the reignited version tries to update the vibes of this first world before moving on to the next. Reignited is pretty faithful for the most part. It has new voice acting, but the script is pretty much the same. Spyro still sounds bratty, which is nice.
What about Gnasty Gnorc? I'm going after him.
A lot of the line delivery for the dragons is way better, and one of the coolest things is how much effort there is in animating the dragons and giving each a personality and little design flourishes. They really feel like a reward now too, with such strong animation to see. Graphically, it does melt my face off a bit, like who would have imagined back in 1998 that we could get a Spyro game that looks like this. I really like most of the enhancements they've done to the environments, lots of extra detail to flesh out the character of levels. I like the reinterpretation of Dark Hollow as this library filled with magical books. Spyro controls mostly the same, but not one-to-one. He's more suited for analog sticks, and of course having the second analog for camera control is convenient. While Spyro himself looks great, as do his dragon pals, the Gnorcs look way uglier here in their higher fidelity. Gnasty Gnorc looks like the original Chris Farley version of Shrek. The Gnorcs look more goofy and cute in the PS1 version, though I do see the vision in making most of them more grotesque. There's a new soundtrack featuring all remakes of Stuart Copeland's tracks done by the composers at Toys for Bob. These are dynamic tracks that will change tone depending on what's happening in the level. For me, the core ethos of the Copeland songs are there, but these new versions feel like they sink into the background a bit more and don't command your attention as much as the original games. I kinda see the vision sometimes with the dynamic music, but nothing really stood out to me. Luckily you can switch back to the OG tracks in the menu, which I think is the best option because they're all slammers. Finally, the skyboxes are still very cool, and some levels are drenched in the same atmosphere but with modern lighting effects. But while flashy skyboxes do still pop out at you, the less flashy ones don't translate as well. I prefer the original Town Square vibes, for example, but Toasty's sunset is still really nice. Now we're off to the Peacekeeper's world, which is filled with battle-hardened dragons. This is a cool feature, where the dragons you free will be designed to correspond with each world, so the ones you free here are bulkier and gruffer. Peacekeepers is like deserty vibes, maybe like the Australian outback or something. We've got a bunch of wallabies here, and the enemies will run to hide and even sometimes moon you before you toast them. It's really cool how much personality they apply to the enemies in this game. I like that a lot of them have kind of bumbling personalities or are up to mischief with one another. Now on to Dry Canyon. This one has a nice music track. You can hear Stuart Copeland kind of just jamming out on a few of the tracks like this in Spyro, and I like that. I don't really know what the purple sludge water is here, but it's a fun color. I also like these enemies with the vultures too. I have a soft spot for big dumb guy enemies using other enemies as weapons. This level has the first dragon I'd consider missable, in terms of it's not obvious to find just by running about the level casually. I don't think I ever got it as a kid because you have to do this leap of faith and glide blindly to the left from here in order to get him. There are gems pointing this way, but I didn't know about this dragon until I went on the internet to find a walkthrough. Spyro actually uses a really smart technique to work within PS1's limitations on draw distance. Other games around this time would use fog to mask bits of the level not yet loaded in, but Spyro uses a technique where it still loads them, but just at lower detail, and more detail loads in as you get closer. This decision makes this game feel quite finely aged. The lower detail stuff better drops into the background as set dressing alongside the skyboxes, and the transition into detail as you move closer feels natural. None of Spyro's levels are particularly big or open, so it doesn't really pop up as an issue. Each level is designed around the limitations, and as such you're never wondering too much about what that weird shape is meant to represent. They use landmarks which are recognizable shapes even when rendered without much detail. In the reignited version, the draw distance is perfect, and so makes the levels feel a bit more open and grand, which is nice. But even the way the game's designed, it doesn't really affect the way you play it too much. There's just a couple instances where maybe it's easier to get your head around the level's layout because of the better draw distance. Spyro 1 is a really well designed game. Next is Cliff Town, which is a cool level with a skybox drenched in a pinky orange evening glow, with stars visible. God, the skyboxes in this game are so peak, dude. Just kind of nice fun vibes. Does what it says on the tin, it's a little town on the foot of a cliff. You can glide over to this point from the cliff's summit. It's a good fun level. I like these enemies that smack the little dudes with the ponchos awake to run at you. Switching things up a bit is Ice Cavern, which is this nighttime icy cave level. The color theory applied to this game is so good, and the mix of purples and blues as well as the warmer appearance inside the buildings of this level make for a great vibe. Even when you can't see the skybox, the atmosphere is great with all the sparkling magical colors. Magical really is the word for this game. You can even see a little bit of the northern lights up in the sky if you look carefully. Then on to the boss of this world, Dr. Shemp. This level maybe has the best skybox in the game, or at least one of the best. It's another sunset type level, but it actually has a visible solar eclipse. This looks so cool. Dr. Shemp himself is probably my favorite boss in the game, just because he's kind of funny, and I like the little finger gun animation that he pops off if you get hit by him. Again though, this is really easy. Spyro 1 is maybe infamous for not having really figured out boss battles, since Spyro's controls and abilities don't really allow for much in-depth combat. This is arguably a bit easier than Toasty, because at least there's not a bunch of those dog enemies that can pile onto you. You just have to dodge Dr. Shemp's extremely choreographed attack and get a strike in on his weak spot behind. Checking back in with Reignited, the Peacekeepers fares well. Though playing this directly after finishing the PS1 original, I was having some trouble readjusting to gliding at the peak of my jump. On PS1 I never had issues gliding places that required a big jump beforehand, but in the remake I had trouble sometimes. But the graphics are going crazy, and some levels instead of having bottomless pits now have more detail like quicksand. Though it isolates the original game as having this low poly liminal vibe which rules. In PS1 Spyro there's also this gallop move that you can do if you charge and jump at the same time, and it's kinda cracked, like you can go pretty fast with it. This is totally taken out of the remake unfortunately, which is a shame, but it's not like it was something essential to the game. I like Ice Cavern's Aurora in the skybox. That's a cool element that comes off better in the higher detail of the remake. And this level I felt did benefit from the increased draw distance. They made the eclipse in Dr. Shemp look cooler too, though I still like the vibrancy of these PS1 skyboxes, even if it does mean I am high on nostalgia. Onto World 3 of 6, the Magic Crafters, which is a mountainous environment caught just when the snow is melting. It's inhabited by a bunch of goofy wizards and has a nice pastel coloured vibe. Lots of bright blues and purples. This game just looks so nice. I like the aqua blue water in this game. It's like so blue that it's maybe not actually water. These Magic Crafters levels add in a bit more platforming challenge, with some of the wizards moving platforms about leading to timing-based jumps. Still not exactly challenging, but things are ramping up as you'd expect. This level is called High Caves and introduces a fairy who can give you a temporary flame power-up. Really though, the main attraction is these supercharged ramps which are introduced in these new levels, which make you charge really fast for increased power and jump. It can be a bit fiddly, but using these ramps to get big air is fun. I like that the enemies are squabbling amongst themselves here before you even get involved. I love fun touches like that in the games. No reason they had to do that, but it adds so much character. They start getting a little trippy with the skyboxes around this time, like the light green tint on this level, Wizard Peak, is really cool. One thing that sticks out in Spyro 1 you may notice playing in this world is that the number of blue thieves with eggs has gone up quite a bit, but then after this world they vanish from the game. Makes me wonder if they were only intended for this world, since the thieves seem like they fit the aesthetics of the Magic Crafters the most, but they added some extra ones into the earlier levels to flesh them out a bit, since they're so simple and without much challenge. The boss for this world is Blowhard, though unlike what this guy's name suggests, he shouldn't be bragging about anything because he's so easy to beat. It's lucky these boss levels are more about the platforming challenge than an actual boss fight, because this dude is so easy. You just run up to him and flame, then repeat times 3. The bosses in Spyro 1 are pathetically easy and not particularly involving, but hot take, I do kind of like them a bit better than the bosses in the sequels. They have a bunch of typical platformer boss fights where you're dumped in an arena and dodge waves of attacks before they reveal their weak spot or drop a power up for you to get a hit in. At least here you have a platforming level in complement with the boss. In the reignited version of Spyro 1, I do notice a lot of levels feeling bigger than they are due to the denser detail and foliage. This is kind of a neutral point, but I feel like the levels in Magic Crafters did blend together a bit due to a more uniform usage of certain elements like the snow textures and the same mountains across all the levels. I really like the embers left on the ground when you flame, such a cool detail. Also generally, the cartoony graphics are really nice, and I think you only have to look as far as the Crash Bandicoot remake to see how the importance of an art direction really helps your game's identity. I don't know if this is considered controversial, but honestly I think the Crash remakes look bad, and thankfully the developers of these Spyro remakes went on to make Crash 4 with a way better art style, similar to the Spyro remakes. Now we're at the Beastmakers, which is a swampy bayou area. You might notice that this is the first level to use dark fog instead of lowering the detail of what's in the distance, and as such this is where the visuals do feel a bit more dated, though the dark fog in a swamp level is hardly a bad compromise. This level, Terrace Village, has this insanely cool green skybox, probably one of the top skyboxes in the game. It feels kind of otherworldly, which suits this game. There's not really been too much challenge so far across this game, but the enemies in this level, Misty Bog, can give you some trouble. I'd always get eaten by these weird things as a kid, and then I'd have to watch this animation of them chewing Spyro up and spitting him out over and over. And now we're at Treetops, the most infamous level in Spyro 1. It's going to make you run around a fair bit, as the only way to get between paths is to complete a loop and come all the way back to the start of the level. I never quite knew what these enemies were supposed to be either, so thanks for the remake for showing me that they were monkeys all along. I don't really know if the PS1 graphics got that across well. So, playing through the game until this point, aside from a couple missable dragons I've highlighted, none have been particularly tough to seek out. However, that all changes here. There's a dragon in Treetops that I could never get as a kid, and even now I have to look up on YouTube how to get it because it's not obvious at all. This level has a series of supercharge ramps, and you'll have to successfully chain a few together in an order that's not obvious, and including going the wrong way off a few. Once you know the path, it's not too hard to pull off, but actually carving out the path there without cheating like me and looking up how to do it on the internet is quite hard. I think these thieves are supposed to show you the paths, but the path is so random, it's hard to even follow the thieves there without already knowing the way. The boss in Beastmakers is Metalhead, which fits in with the enemy theme of the world, which is a bunch of Norks messing about with electricity. This guy's design is kind of generic, but the actual boss battle has a mechanic this time instead of just walking up and attacking. You gotta charge into his pylons to get rid of his power. Still really easy, but hey, at least we're shaking things up a bit. Now the reignited version I think shines best in its rendition of the Beastmakers world. The hub looks so much better with the increased fidelity and draw distance. They even made the green skybox in Terrace Village arguably even better. This bonkers green starry night with aurora visible is so cool. One-ups the original even a little bit in my opinion. This northern lights in the swamp aesthetic is a big vibe. Like what else has this sort of atmosphere? In Misty Bog, the weird rabbit plants no longer give me trouble, but these frogs kick my ass instead. Treetop still has the obtuse dragon to get, but we're back with the northern lights in the treetops. This is peak vibes. Lots of cool stuff to see in this penultimate world of the Dreamweavers. It again has a pastel coloured atmosphere with stars in the sky, a cool spacey vibe with lots of pinks and purples. Enemies here are able to change size and shape, and there's also these reoccurring jester characters. This hub also has one of the best skyboxes in the game. It's so pretty. This is the most purple part of the Purple Dragon game, so drink it in. This world is where the magical dragon type vibes are most heavily felt, with fairies, castles, and so on. A cool thing about Spyro is that while the levels are simple, I think maybe other than Treetops, all the levels are very easy to traverse, and you won't get lost in the game. The decision not to use fog and instead change the polygon count means that the levels are built around landmarks, so that you'll be moving between distinct places and objects. Whoever came up with this design decision deserved the fattest raise because it's amazing. More purple here and dark passage. I like the way this level works, where you'll want to lighten up bits of the level to nerf the enemies into smaller versions. Like these big scary dogs are actually cute little things that you'll feel bad about sunning into eternity. Haunted Towers is another one with a missable dragon that you'll have to do some supercharged mischief to get up to. I always found this to be a red herring part of the game because I always assume that you'd have to use this bit of the level here as a ramp, but actually you just jump over here and get to a secret area where you'll obtain the flame power up indefinitely until you leave the level. This power up is the only way to defeat these haunted suits of armor. Now we're at another boss, and you guessed it, Jock is also piss easy. I really like the blood red sunset skybox here. The repeated use of cool sunset skyboxes for most of the bosses so far is a nice motif. The enemies here are kind of crazy. They look like it could be from a different game entirely, like what are these nightmarish creatures? In the reignited interpretation of Dreamweavers, you really feel the grotesqueness of the enemy designs. Like these jesters and friends are so freaky. The cute dog enemies that turn big and evil in darkness always stood out to me as a fun joke, so it's a bit lame that the small dogs look rough and nasty now. The skyboxes do look really cool, even if there's some instances of them all being kind of similar with their pinks and purples so that they blend a bit. The dark passage one with the spacey stars and lights is so cool, it feels really otherworldly. Shame most of that level is inside. We're in the end game now. Nasty Nork's world maybe points a little bit towards them running out of time, as its hub area is very simple, and there's only 2 levels before the boss rather than 3. I like the ominous music, and here you'll notice that they run out of new dragon models, so they reused a bunch from earlier in the game.
Hey, didn't I already free you?
Spyro does catch on to this, so I'd like to assume that after getting saved, these dragons all came here and then got turned into crystal again. Because if you think about it, Spyro's rescued like 70 fully grown adult dragons at this point. Can't some of you guys come help out? Where the hell are they going when I free them? Whatever dude, I'll finish things myself. Nork Cove immediately shirks the ominous feel of the hub, and we're back in happy fun times with upbeat music. I don't know what's up with these human looking enemies. What kind of world is Spyro in anyway? Reignited turns them back into Norks, so maybe this was just an oversight. I don't know what the hell these guys are supposed to be. Hell yes, we get more sunset skyboxes before the end of the game. These Norks are kind of kitted out with these machine guns and grenades, honestly. They finally woke the fuck up and decided to try a bit harder to kill this little purple dragon. This is probably one of my favorite levels though. Great song on the soundtrack, sunset vibes, fairly challenging in comparison to what came before in terms of dodging all these weapons. This is a fun level, and it's a shame it's the last one before the final boss. Here is the big fella himself, the final boss fight against Nasty Nork, and guess what? It's kind of the same thing as all the other boss fights. Yes, it's still really easy. The only extra bit this time is you have to chase a couple thieves around for keys before you get to chase Nasty around. The platforming is a bit trickier here than most levels, but no issues really. It's slightly anticlimactic, but what can you do? Now comes the ending, where the game taunts you for not having gotten all the collectibles.
I still got some treasure to pick up.
Honestly, nowadays I wouldn't recommend getting all the gems in Spyro on PS1. It leads to a frustrating experience where you'll get to the end of the level with 199 out of 200 gems and have to scour the level looking for that one hidden somewhere obtuse. I find the game a fun little romp that you can finish in 1 or 2 sittings. You just gotta turn off completionist brain. Though if you chose to play the remake, then it's a bit more forgiving to fully complete than the PS1 version. But if you so choose, then the reward for getting all the dragons, all the gems, and all the eggs is one final level called Nasty's Loot, which is like a combo of a regular level and a speedway. You can freely fly here, and it has lots and lots of extra treasure. On PS1 there's some performance hiccups though, so it's a cool little extra feature to see how the future of Spyro might have ended up with free flying, but it's not essential. It's one of the few bits where the reignited version is undeniably better, though if you do choose not to be a completionist, you do miss out on the extra ending cutscene where the dragons are playing basketball with a sheep. So who knows, maybe I'm the fool after all for skipping out this time. I know as a kid I'd have wanted to see this if I didn't have too much ADHD brain to lock in and get all the gems. For the reignited version, it keeps the reused dragons for Nasty's world. Unfortunately, they dropped the ball on the funniest line read in the original game.
You gotta believe. You gotta believe.
Also, I hate to say it bros, but Spyro went woke. Yes, according to the official spreadsheet of woke, Spyro Reignited Trilogy has been deemed woke. You might wonder how Spyro could possibly be woke. It's a game with no politics, not based in reality, and the only woman involved is scantily clad fairies after all. But the guns and grenades are nerfed in Twilight Harbor. To be honest, it is kinda lame that the machine guns are now goofy paintball guns, but I guess I get it. Even in the 90s, they banned a Pokemon episode because it had someone pointing a gun at Ash. So it's kind of a wonder the realistic guns even made it into the 1998 PS1 Spyro. Though a cool touch in the updated Twilight Harbor is these smoke fumes going up into the sunset sky. I think I realized what makes the new music tracks not work as well, and it's the dynamic element. If you're indoors, the songs will become more ambient and muted, and in general the song changing tempo and pitch intermittently doesn't allow for you to get as much of a feel for it compared to the original versions, which do a much better job at grabbing you by the ears. Generally, the new version of the song aren't much different from Stuart Copeland's originals, and in theory the dynamic element is cool, but I just don't think it really works for me in practice. Spyro would go on to get 2 more titles on the PS1 developed by Insomniac Games. When I was a kid, Spyro 3: Year of the Dragon was my favourite, but playing these days I feel like it's got way too many hit or miss minigames and gimmicky vehicle segments. You could tell they felt like they got almost all they could out of Spyro by that point. Then after this, Insomniac dropped off the franchise to make Ratchet & Clank instead, leading to different studios creating new entries in the Spyro canon. I was pretty lenient about games being mediocre as a kid, but playing the 4th Spyro game, Enter the Dragonfly on GameCube, this was one where even as a kid I knew I'd been ripped off. Whatever means you use to play the game, it runs like it's on a toaster, and even if it ran well, it's still just a kind of mid experience that just feels worse than the PS1 game by a large margin.
No, 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 no.
Spyro 1 remains a favourite of mine, and I think it's not just nostalgia, even if it does play a big part. I think this little game flexed its muscles and overcame the limitations of a PS1 in really smart ways. Graphically it's a bit dated, but the amount of thought put into the colours and theming of levels is amazing. Then there's this slammer of a soundtrack by Stuart Copeland to go along with it. It creates an amazing mood for this game. Spyro 1 just has one of the best low-poly PS1 game vibes. It's a little bit empty and surreal, dreamy and ethereal. The Dragon Worlds feel serene, and things are left up to your imagination a bit more, with not as many NPCs as the following games. The liminal feeling of the levels and uncanny vibe just feel memorable. The way the game forgoes using fog and instead utilizes changing polygon counts for faraway elements, making them sink into the gorgeous skyboxes, is a low-key decision that makes this game hold up even today on PS1. So many game design decisions that we can learn a lot from. It shows working within limitations to do things nobody expected. It's 100% one of the most defining PS1 games for me, up there with stuff like Final Fantasy VII, Metal Gear Solid, and Ridge Racer 4 in my opinion. I still recommend the PS1 version above Reignited, though they are generally similar in quality. I'm kind of a remake hater, especially how much modern mainstream gaming revolves around remakes and remasters rather than anything new, but I do think Spyro 1 on the Reignited trilogy is still a pretty good remake, though far from perfect. You'll see a lot of stuff they changed isn't totally satisfying, and most of the modding scene is just people modding stuff from the original back in. For me though, the PS1 game is a piece of gaming history that still stands strong, and I think it's still so cool and fun to play. Spyro might be simple, but its simplicity is deceptive in regard to how much mileage you can get out of it. It's a game that rewards you for replaying it, and there's so many smart little touches that make playing through these levels a great experience in terms of gameplay, level design, and art direction.